Hello and welcome to Sunday Night Conversations presented by D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Tonight's episode brought to us by our good friends at Netting Pros, the official netting partner of D1 Baseball and Sunday Night Conversations. They're the industry leaders in sports facility netting and equipment solutions. You can find their products at some of the top venues in Division I college baseball, talking about the University of Tennessee, Texas, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Oregon State, LSU, Mississippi State, so many more. Whether it's batting practice equipment, facility netting, custom wall padding, custom facility improvements, Netting Pros is the top choice in the industry for facility equipment solutions. Visit nettingpros.com today to learn more. This is the last of this year's Sunday Night Conversation. So appreciative of those guys at Netting Pros. They are awesome in every way, and couldn't do it without them. So I am a little melancholy that this is the last. It's our 10th installment of the year of Sunday Night Conversations, and I think we could say we saved the best for last. Tonight, we're going to talk about the late, great Wayne Graham and Rice baseball. And I'll introduce the three guests in a minute here. I want to do a caveat. Coach Graham's career is so impressive that there's some of the things I'm going to say, I just worry that it can come off as me taking a shot at Rice athletics, because what he did with Rice baseball is so different than the history of the school and athletics. And I don't want to do that. Like I want to be fair. I'm going to tell Coach Graham's story. We all are. But, I think we have to understand one of the reasons Rice has not been a juggernaut in athletics is because it is literally one of the finest academic institutions on the planet Earth. And it's also one of the smallest institutions, if not the smallest, in Division I. I believe Rice is the smallest undergraduate population to win a national title in a team sport. And so, again, like that just makes what Coach Graham did at Rice that much more impressive. I mean, think about it's the fourth longest streak for regionals in college baseball history, 23 in a row. And Rice has never they never went to a regional before Coach Graham. They haven't been to one since. Before Coach Graham got the job in the fall of '91, Rice had only had 7 winning seasons in 75 years in the Southwest Conference. 12 straight years of winning some version of a regular season conference championship, 7 Omahas, the national championship. I mean, it's bonkers. There was a 12-year stretch where Rice baseball went to Omaha more often than they didn't go to Omaha. I mean, basically, Coach Graham and you guys made it look easy, and we know it's just not easy. So anyway, it's just hard to paint this picture without feeling like you're taking a shot at what others have tried to accomplish. I don't mean it that way, but again, at the same time, what Coach Graham did is absolutely incredible, and we want to celebrate it. So let me do the guess. So I've got David Pierce here, who was an assistant for Coach Graham for 9 seasons, was an assistant coach on the 2003 national championship team. When David left Rice, became the head coach at Sam Houston, then at Tulane, then at Texas, had a really cool streak of 7 straight regionals with 3 different schools. His Texas teams went to Omaha 3 out of 4 years. Almost went, you're a super regional away from going 4 out of 5 years. So obviously, if you follow college baseball, Coach Pierce's career and how well he's done. And it's just cool that it all started. I love David's background because I was also a high school coach, and David was a high school coach for 10 years before, kind of on the front end of his career. And Coach Graham did that as well. Coach Graham, 10 years as a high school coach. By the way, Coach Graham, I'm sure someone has said this before me, but his 10 years at San Jac, it's got to be the most dominant stretch of junior college baseball coaching. For 7 straight years, they either won the junior college national title or lost the championship game. They won 5 of them. They played in the finals the 2 other times from 84 to 90. So anyway, Coach Pierce is here. We've got Patrick Hallmark, who's the head coach at UTSA right now. And, Patrick was a player on Coach Graham, I would say the first team that really popped for Coach Graham in 95, and then came back and coached with Coach Graham for 11 years. And now Patrick's head coaching career was an incredible word. That went great. Now is at UTSA, went great in CUSA, now doing really well in the American. So, and then Joe Healy is here, and I will brag on Joe. I would argue Joe is the most talented person we have in the college baseball media space. He really shouldn't be doing this. He should be like an executive for an insurance company or something. But we sucked him in. We're not letting him go. And the reason I bring all that up is because the reason Joe works in college baseball is because he grew up in Houston when these Rice teams were taking college baseball by storm. So we're grateful for that. Another gift from Coach Graham there. So David, let me start with you. I want to have everyone tell us their kind of like Coach Graham origin story. Like, how'd you end up having Coach Graham in your life? And you go first, DP.
Okay, well, first of all, Roons, Joe, appreciate you having me on, and good to see Patrick again. We spent some good times together, 6 years together with Coach at Rice, but it actually started even before most people know. I went back to school in '91 to get my certificates, and I was coaching at Rice as a restricted earnings position. And so back then, the number 2 position was called the restricted earnings position, and you could only make like $6,000. And so I was waiting for David Hall in his last year. Coach Graham got the job, and he gave me a call, and I was really excited because I thought I might have an opportunity to go work for him. And when he called me, he said, look, I know you went out to see this one pitcher. I need to know what you think about him. And it was James Madrid, and I went to Lubbock, Coronado to watch him. It was my first recruiting trip ever. And I said, Coach, I don't know what you have coming in, but James can really spin the baseball and he can really throw strikes. So, I think he can help you. And he's like, okay, I really appreciate that. And so I'm waiting on him to say, well, kind of what's your game plan? What are you going to do? I know you were at Rice. He didn't have time for me. He was so locked in on James Madrid. So that didn't end so well. But anyway, fast forward to September of 2002, Chris Rupp went to take the head job at Sam Houston State, and I was able to go interview with Coach Graham. I was at Houston at the time, and when I went over, Coach is very intriguing. He's very, very interesting to just listen to. He's so smart, and he knows the game really well. So that really excited me to have the opportunity there. So we got in the interview, and it was probably a couple of hours, and I didn't say much. He did most of the talking, but I was the one being interviewed. He knew what he wanted, okay? In 2002, they struggled against left-handed pitching. And he started talking about the lineup, and he said, Chris Kokorski, he's our leadoff hitter. He's a really good hitter. And by the way, they were eliminated in Omaha in 2002. So he said, Kokorski is our leadoff hitter. He's got a little hitch in his swing. He said, don't mess with him. He's going to hit. Just throw him good batting practice. And I said, okay, I understand that. Now, Austin Davis, very unorthodox, kind of dives, long swing. He's going to get jammed some. Great hitter. Just throwing good left-handed batting practice. He's going to hit. He said, now, Vincent Sinise is one of the best hitters in the country. He said, whatever you do, don't screw him up. He goes, all I want you to do is just throw him really good left-handed batting practice. So I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. And fortunately, he hired me. It was awesome. And I always mess with Coach about that. But we had a great relationship, even when I was working there, but, even afterwards. But that was my origin. That's how I got started. And, I gained, I guess, 4 or 5 years because the first year in 2003, we were fortunate won the national championship. So that gave me a little cushion with him.
I love it. Hey, David, when you were at Texas, did Coach Graham, by the way, that's the other caveat. If I refer to Coach Graham as the OG, that is just like hardwired in because he is the original gangster. When you were at Texas, was Coach Graham and Tanya his wife living in Austin the whole time, or you would see them just on occasion?
No, they moved probably a year after he finished up at Rice. And it was pretty cool because Patrick was in San Antonio, and he would tell me this. He goes, I'm going to center myself between my 3 guys. So he moved to Austin. He and Tanya moved to Austin. He came to practice a lot. He would sit and just like he did when he was coaching. He would sit in the stands and watch everything, and we would talk about different pitchers, and he always wanted to talk about the spike curveball. Who throws the spike curveball, and we'd kind of review that. And then Mike Taylor, who was also with us, was at Baylor at the time. So Mike was an hour and 15 minutes up the road. Patrick was an hour and 15 minutes south of us. And it was really cool having him around. And, a lot of guys gave me mess about, Coach being around me all the time, and I just thought it was awesome to have him and Tanya so close, living in Austin and being at the stadium so much.
Oh, it's so great. Very cool. Hey, Patrick, you go next, and yours is interesting because you both played for Coach and coached for him at two different points in the run. So go wherever you want with this, but kind of tell us how you came to know Coach Graham.
Yeah, I was at Alvin Community College playing, and he recruited me. Pretty typical. He didn't say much on the visit. Coach Prather and Coach Ferris were the assistants at the time, and they did most of the recruiting. And Coach basically made the offer and said, literally, he said, "I hope you come here." And that was it. That was the extent of the recruiting. But I had some buddies on the team at the time. Jose Cruz Jr., who's the coach there now, was on the team at the time, and him and I grew up together. So anyway, I ended up there, and best decision I ever made, career-wise. I didn't realize it, but it was the best career decision I ever made. So played there 1 year, signed a professional contract. 10 years later, I was working camp. So I played 9 years of pro ball. 10 years later, I'm working coach's summer camp. I was done playing pro ball, just fresh out. And the volunteer coach at the time was Zane Curry. And Zane and I were tight. Zane walked out to camp and said, "Hey, do you want my job?" And I thought he was kidding. And he said, "I'm serious. Go talk to Coach." And the meeting was similar to David's. I throw right-handed. So he did ask the two questions he asked, the only two questions. He said, "Can you throw good BP?" And I said, "Yes." And at the time, I didn't know. I just got done playing, but I knew I'd figured out.
Right.
And the only other question was, in 10 years, are you going to be a coach or are you going to be selling insurance? And I said, "I'll be."
That's awesome.
Roons, I'll say, I remember when Coach hired Patrick, I went to his office because we were getting a lot of interest for that job. And I said, "Coach, we need to figure out our pitching situation. You know, a lot of people are interested in the job." It was a volunteer position at the time. He goes, "Don't worry about it." He goes, "I'm going to move you to pitching, and whoever we hire," which happened to be Patrick, he goes, "he'll go with the outfielders, catchers, and help with the hitters." I'm like, "Okay, so I got a plan."
Gotta love it. And just to be clear, David, you had never pitched well, maybe you pitched when you were a kid.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
That's awesome. All right, so let me not. I'm gonna try to keep us on track here. This is great. We're off. This is so beautiful. I have so many questions I want to ask. Joe, let me get you in here. Tell us about growing up, and then probably you could pick a million different sports, but Rice baseball becomes this thing.
Yeah, it's quite a story. Like I wrote about it on the site right after the coach passed, and if you haven't read it and you're listening to this, go check it out. It was. I believe it when I say that if not for Coach Graham, I'm not sitting here, right? And a lot of people can say that. Coach Hallmark can say that. Coach Pierce might say that. I'm obviously not in the same business as them, and yet here I am, right? Coach Graham inspired me in a way that he inspired so many others that were on the field, right? So yeah, as a kid, I grew up in a Rice family. One half of my family was Rice folks. I have two uncles that went to Rice. I have two cousins who went to Rice. I was not smart enough for Rice, but I grew up with it. And I just remember as a kid, Roons, you mentioned you don't want to dog Rice athletics, but let's call a spade a spade. Like I grew up going to football games at Rice Stadium, and one of my earliest memories is watching them get the brakes beat off of them by Air Force running the option. Fisher DeBerry was the head coach. And I was just like, man, this is a brutal existence. But then Coach Graham comes along, and I'm still a little bit young, but Coach Hallmark's team in 95 comes around, and my uncles are telling me, "Hey, the baseball team's pretty good. Do you want to check it out with us? Do you want to go out to the games?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so that kind of got me hooked on college baseball. It was Rice baseball first, but then it got me interested in other parts of college baseball, right? And so the University of Houston crosstown, Rainer Noble was doing big things there. I mean, U of H never, made that push to Omaha, but they were right there with Rice for a long time during that run. Mm-hmm. And Coach Pierce knows about that better than any of us sitting here. So it just kind of made me curious about the sport in general. Like, okay, yes, I just started off going to games at Rice, but then I was able to kind of branch out. And then there's a second part to this story. So I fall in love with the sport. I go to school. I take a job out of school. I'm working in the tech industry, thinking, I always wanted to work in sports. I always wanted to work in college baseball, but just hadn't found my way in yet. And I started writing for a small site that doesn't exist anymore. But I'll never forget my first game covering a game at Rice, and Kendall was there actually. And so after the game, like Coach Graham liked to do interviews in his office. Coaches now, it's on the field or it's in an interview room. Coach Graham just wanted you to come down to his office and sit there with him. And it was an old school thing, right? That's the way skippers would do it back in the day. And I just kind of assumed the real reporters will talk. Kendall will talk to Coach Graham, and then they'll take care of the business. And then they'll let me come in and ask a couple questions before they tell me to scram, right? But Coach Graham says, is that everybody? And the SID at the time, John Sullivan, was like, oh, well, we've got a couple more. And it was me and another younger guy. And Coach Graham's like, well, tell him to come on in here. Like, let's go. And so it's Coach Graham in his underpants in the office. And, and not only was it the experience of getting to pick his brain and talk about what we'd seen, but it was also him scrolling through the D1 baseball scoreboard and asking all of us what we thought about the different games going on. And we just sat there for a long time going through that. But it meant so much to me that someone in his position treated me the same as he treated Kendall, right? Who had all this experience. It was a name in the business and all that. I didn't belong yet, but he treated me like I belonged. And that gave me the confidence to keep going, right? Because he treated me that way. And without it, who knows how it goes. But the fact that Wayne Graham gave me the time of day gave me confidence to go other places and assume that I was going to be given the time of day. And so that confidence kind of propelled me forward. So there's two parts there. It was an inspiration to me as a young person, and then an inspiration to me when I first got into this business. And without either of those, who knows if I'm here or not.
So good. Coach Graham had a presence now. Like, I think a lot of the great ones have been that way. And man, so many places your guys' stories took me. I think about, I remember being a young assistant coach and dreaming of being a Division I head coach. And, you get a lot of no's, but then you have people like Coach Graham who didn't get his Division I break until age 55, and I remember Coach David, you guys were there the year after the national title. We played you in your tournament at Reckling Park, and we had a kid, Jason Urquidez, that beat Jeff Neiman. And, Neiman had been 17-0 on the national championship team. And, obviously my boss, Pat Murphy, was fairly intimidating too. But when we shook hands afterwards, Coach Graham was such a legend. You didn't know whether he was going to cuss at you or slap you or shake your hand. I mean, it's just so intimidating. And I'll never forget, he said to us, he said, that guy right there is going to win you all some games. And he was right. Jason Urquidez went 13-4 that year. It was so good. Hey, so here's the question. David.
Was that Pedroia's freshman year? Because he had a home run against us, and I think it was that game. Yeah.
So that was his junior year. He just always looked like a freshman. He never not looked like a freshman. That's right,
because in 2002 I was at Houston, and we were in the Arizona State Regional.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you guys were the 1 seed, and we hosted at the Cubs place at Hohokam, and man, you guys were loaded that year. And Pedroia punched out looking to end that regional, and thought he was going to murder the umpire. That was, but yeah, that Michael Bohr, you guys were loaded that
we were good
team.
Yeah, we were kind of a pitcher away, but we had a really good team. And just to add to what Joe was saying, one thing too that as we get in and we talk about Coach, the one thing that I really adopted a lot of things that he does, but I always enjoyed the fact that he ran the program like a professional organization. After a game, very seldom did we meet. If you won, we ate in the clubhouse. We had music. We celebrated the win. If we lost, we ate in the clubhouse. We went home, and we got ready to go again the next day. And, he didn't have the players. He knew that they were at a tough school, academic school, and he didn't just carry it out until 11, 12 o'clock at night. Ball game is over. Let's eat. Let's move on. And we always called it the clubhouse. We never called it the locker room. And to this day, I still call our place the clubhouse. And I remember how organized he was with his thought of, how he ran it like a professional organization. And I think the players really appreciated it as well.
Yeah, as you say that, David, I'm thinking about, I'm gonna come back to this question because Coach Graham was so much more than a college baseball coach. You know, when he first went to the University of Texas as an undergrad student, he was an engineering student. And what I know about Coach Graham, that makes perfect sense. Like, he really was a brilliant person who just picked baseball for his career. He was a big leaguer. He had 30 games in the big leagues. It's not like he was not a player of any, obviously he was a legitimate player. Okay, so here's the question. I would normally say this for the end, but I don't know how to do anything other than ask it now. So here's the question. The question is, how did he do this? Like, Rice didn't make a decision that we are going to be a national power in baseball and then picked Coach Graham to pull that off. Coach Graham drug Rice up that mountain. And again, I know that's going to sound a little pejorative, but like, Coach Graham is the one that did that. No one else had that vision. And of course, it takes great assistant coaches. It takes support. It takes great players. And it's in some ways, I'm asking, what is Coach Graham's superpower? But David, why don't I start with you, and then Patrick, and then Joe? Just like, how did Coach Graham build a national power in baseball out of thin air?
He played the percentages really well. He knew the game better than anyone. He knew his personnel really well. And we used to have a football coach that coached for the Houston Oilers named Bum Phillips. And Bum Phillips said, I can take yours and beat mine, and I can take mine and beat yours. And that was Coach Graham. He had the confidence that he could fix anyone, he could develop anyone, and he knew how to prioritize every player and how they fit into the lineup, how they fit into the staff. In 2003, I think we had over 600 innings pitched, and 5 of those guys threw 550 of those innings. And then he utilized the other guys around those 5 guys. So he just had such a knack of putting guys in the right place. But more than anything, and this is my opinion, Patrick will have his, but he convinced guys that they could do anything. He had this ability to continue to talk about something over and over and over until it became a reality, and the players bought into it. There was many times, and we discussed this earlier today, we would come in after a win and just kind of like, how did we do that? How did we win the game? And we just had this aura about us that we were going to win no matter what. We didn't know when, we didn't know how, but we knew we were going to win the game. And he presented that every single day with us. He talked about Omaha a lot. He talked about what it takes. He always had an incredible vision. And to his last breath, he would tell me, you make sure you tell those guys they got to believe in themselves. If they don't believe in themselves, why should anyone else believe in them? And he would always just say little things like that. And I like to think I was a good listener. So I picked up on as much as I could. Every time he talked, I listened.
That's really good. Patrick, go ahead. Same question. How did he do it? Like, how did he pull this off?
Yeah, David hit on it. It's will. It's competitive will. It's probably overused. We all talk about it. We all want it in our players, and we all have players that have it. But Coach's was special. It was beyond any competitive will I've come across, and we all think we have it. You know, I think I have a good competitive will, and I know David Pierce has a strong competitive will. So, but Coach's was beyond special. And then David hit on the other stuff, and you have too. He was very intelligent. Coach could get the most out of any player through that will, but also through knowing where to go with it. They might only have one tool. You know, a pro scout might not like them, and they end up at Rice like me. I had one tool. I basically could run, and the other schools didn't want me. And Coach did, and he could mold that one tool into a player, and he could get you to beat people with one tool. You know, sometimes two. We had really good players too. Don't get me wrong. You had your Lance Berkmans and your Jose Cruz Juniors, and so Coach knew the environment. He was highly intelligent, and what I mean by he knew his environment is, if you look at most of those Rice teams, the core of the team was from Houston, so you could keep those kids at home. He knew there were players in Houston that were going to get overlooked by some of the bigger schools, and maybe not even overlooked. I mean, the rosters at those times were a little smaller, So the core of the teams were generally Houston players, and I'd say 95% of the teams were Texas kids. We didn't go out of state too much. So he knew that environment. He knew the pro scouts and that scene. So he was also able to find a lot of good players that maybe other people overlooked, and we wanted to stay at home. He sold that education to us, and he sold winning. I went there because he won. So he knew how to sell a little bit. He was quiet about it. He wasn't a bloviator or a big recruiter in regards to, salesman in that way, but he knew what kids wanted. He could learn about you and know what would impact you. And as David said, he'd get it out of you one way or the other. And it might not go over well today, but he would definitely get it out of you. And we're all better off now because of it.
Yeah,
No
that's so
doubt.
great.
I mean, I can go to, just listening. So you find me a guy that's 88 to 91 and can spin the breaking ball, we'll win with him. And you say that nowadays, and it's like he's not even on the map. But he just had an unbelievable vision of what it takes to win championships. And like Patrick said, his will was incredible. And we're all better as human beings, but we're all better as coaches because of him, for sure.
Yeah. And just like Joe, you and I in our roles now, like we study coaches, right? Like that's obviously players win, games and championships, but everything rises and falls on leadership. And so in our role, you can't help but be a student of coaches, and just almost like as Patrick and David were talking, like the conviction to say, hey, we're going to stay in a 50-mile radius for our players. And, like I'm sure other people said, Coach, you understand, like you're not the only one that knows there's good players in Houston, right? Like that's not a secret. But I mean, you tell me, Joe, what's your take on that in that regard to Coach Graham?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not in the dugout like these two guys are, but just from an outsider's perspective, one thing I always noticed is that it felt like he left no stone unturned from this standpoint. You mentioned it. Rice is not an easy school to get into. It is not an easy school to stay eligible at. And yet they were recruiting guys mostly locally, some from junior colleges, which a lot of highly academic schools don't go the JUCO route quite a bit, right? But he would just find guys who he could get into school and get through school and what have you. And it seemed like he just had a really open mind about who a Rice baseball player could be. One of the other things that I remember seeing that sometimes it'd make me laugh, honestly, because it was just kind of funny. But, I can't tell you how many times he's got a guy up there trying to get a bunt down, and he bunts through it and it's 0-1 and he pinch hits for the guy. And he's like, okay, I've seen enough. Or, pitcher goes 2-0 and doesn't like what he sees, and that's it. And those things weren't done. And these guys can tell you, I mean, those weren't done to embarrass the kid. Those things were done to, put him in a better place. And by the way, that kid didn't get buried. We'd see that kid again next weekend. But in that moment, he was willing to, make that move that might be seen as harsh or embarrassing or what have you to make the player better. And that player wasn't buried, so that's the using that accountability to motivate as opposed to shunning the player and burying them on the bench.
Yeah. And to your point, Joe, let's segue to some of the Rice players. Like, when you have that presence as the head of the program, you said it, Patrick, that's going to attract great players. And the question I'm going to ask you guys is, if I'm only going to let you talk about one Rice player, who's your guy? And the menu is incredible. I mean, like Jose Cruz Jr., Anthony Rendon, Lance Berkman, Matt Anderson, the three starters from the 2003 team, right? Wade Townsend, Philip Humber, Jeff Neiman. I mean, you could, like you mentioned him, David, Chris Colcourse would be my guy. Like that dude, he would like, he would step on a family member to win a baseball game. But David, you go first. I'm going to let you talk about one player from your time at Rice. Who's your guy?
That is such an unfair question. There's too many. And you mentioned a lot of them. That entire 2003 team kind of set the bar. And in 2004, we lost to TSU, Herman Coachman, in game one of the regionals. We had to fight through the losers bracket. We got beaten in the championship. And then '05, we started I think we started 5 freshmen every day and a couple of freshman arms. And then '06, '07, and '08, we're back in Omaha with just different pieces. I'll go with Eddie Degerman. I had a lot of guys, but Eddie Degerman was so interesting and intriguing. Eddie was a transfer from UC Irvine, and I was in California at the area code games, and a couple of our players were playing in Vacaville, California. And they said, "Coach, you need to come see this guy." I go, "Why?" We had a little money. It was August. It was late in the summer, and I said, "Well, what is he?" And it's like, he's just really different, very different. So Eddie, I go out and see him. He's 85, 86, and he's an Iron Mike. I mean, it's literally on the toe. I actually have a picture of him over here. I was going to show you guys, but can you see this?
Yeah.
That's
Oh my gosh.
Up on a toe.
Great pick.
We'll never see that anymore because everybody wants you grounded. But he would come back down, and literally his hand would drag the ground, and he would have his hand open and throw it just like the old Iron Mike. And I'm like, there's no way this guy can develop and be better. But he had that will, that desire, and he could really spin the breaking ball. And where his angle was, he literally had to tilt his head to get his arm in his slide. So the curveball would go both directions. And he would be in warm-ups bouncing the curveball in the grass. And I'm like, how are we gonna win with this guy? And hitter gets in the box, and he would go. But he was an unbelievable person, unbelievable kid. Now he's a doctor. He was in New York. Now he's back to California. But that was a Rice guy. I mean, you just had so many great stories of a guy just needed that opportunity. Coach gave it to him, and he flourished over it.
It's awesome. Hey, David, when you guys got an arm, like Coach was such a big, like the if you asked me to characterize Rice's pitching, it was very old fashioned Texas baseball, right? It was like big fastball and a power breaking ball. Like that was how you guys didn't throw that many changeup guys at people. Like it was big velocity and big spin. Was Coach pretty adamant about everyone's going to at least try a spiked breaking ball, or was that you were more seeking that in recruiting than you were figuring that out when they got there?
No, he was teaching it. It wasn't necessarily I would go back to Wade Townsend, who really spiked it, but he didn't have it when he got there. Coach taught it to him, and then he took it to another level, and then the next guy. But I think those guys, when they put it in their hand, they either like it or they don't. And he was really encouraging with it because he felt like you could get a tighter spin. But in my history, the guys that have really done it well, it's really felt right in their hand, and they've kind of taken advantage of it. But yeah, he was just a master of teaching it. And we threw power breaking balls. You got to 2 strikes, everybody in the ballpark knew what was coming. It didn't matter. He knew he was throwing it, and you were going to have to try to hit it. And if you didn't like the first one, he'd throw it again.
Yeah. It's like you said, David, like Coach Graham had a feel for analytics before analytics, like he, which that's kind of the deal, right? That's part of it. Like the breaking ball is always going to be, people are going to hit for a lower batting average against a breaking ball than they are fastball, unless it's some alien, really special fastball.
Yeah. I mean, I think Patrick ought to answer that because we were talking about it this morning. You talk about tunneling pitches. I mean, he was tunneling pitches back then. And then what his eyes said were exactly what the analytics were saying. And I think that's the way really that the really good coaches really utilize the analytics, but also they trust what they know. And he is one of those guys that he knew a lot more than the guys reading the analytics. And so he was really good at combining them both.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely, it feels like he had that kind of brain. Joe, go ahead. So the question is not your favorite Rice player, although you can name that person. But when I say Rice baseball, who's the name that jumps out at you?
I mean, it's a really simple answer, but I think I have to go Jose Cruz Jr. I think you could make an argument he's as important as any player who came through the program on a couple of levels. One, I think I heard Lance Berkman say at some point that, he committed to Rice in large part because he said, if it's good enough for Jose Cruz Jr., it's good enough for me. like it kind of created a permission structure for Lance to go there. But then secondly, you can't underestimate, I grew up the mother of someone who went to Astros games in the Astrodome in the 70s and 80s, and Cheo Cruz, his dad, is maybe still one of the most popular Astros ever. He still works in the front office, like has a 100% approval rating among Astros fans. And so when his kid ended up at Rice, I mean, it was a big deal locally. I remember hearing about it, and he helped make Rice cool. I don't think you can underestimate the degree to which Rice became cool when this baseball team was good. I mean, you go out to a travel baseball tournament and half the teams in the field have old English letters on their hats from 2000 to 2015 because they saw it on a Rice player and thought it was cool. But so for me, it's Jose Cruz Jr. I mean, obviously a lot of success when he was there, went on to a big league career, but it was just his ties to Houston, I think, were a big deal. And then his recruitment, I think, for people like Lance Berkman kind of signaled that, okay, this is what's happening here is real. This is not just some sort of sideshow thing that's happening there. This has staying power.
Yep. And then Berkman, obviously, those numbers were it's one of the greatest seasons. And I know it's a different era in college baseball, but just, what was it, like 37 home runs, hit almost 500, like 134 RBIs, just insanity.
I will say, Roons, if we're going to go with favorite players or just like players that I think of in my brain as Rice players that people might not know, I have never seen anyone throw a baseball the way Cole St. Clair threw a baseball. It was one of the most, I don't think you could teach that delivery to anyone. And again, a guy who's like, I mean, the radar gun wasn't going to tell you that it was anything exciting, but man, like he tied guys in knots in his role. So a guy that I just have that, much like Eddie Dagerman. When Coach said Eddie Dagerman, my smile came across my face because I hadn't thought about him in a long time. But same thing with Cole St. Clair. I can see his delivery in my mind's eye, and I don't think anyone. First of all, no one should try to throw a baseball like he threw it, but I don't think anyone has ever successfully done it the way he did. Just such a funky guy who had a ton of success there.
That's awesome. David, two questions. Like, two of the signatures for Rice baseball became the uniforms, as Joe mentioned. Like, they were just awesome. They were kind of like a combination of the old English lettering with the St. Louis Cardinals. There was the bat with the Owls, and I mean, those were incredible. And then Reckling Park became iconic in college baseball, the city of Houston. Were those two things there before Coach Graham, or those things were things that came after Coach Graham?
Well, Coach Graham was always a Yankees fan, and he loved that dark navy look. And at the time, Rice was actually a royal blue. And with his background of drawing and all, he just started trying to piece this whole uniform together. And that's what he did. He actually designed the uniform to be as simple and as clean and as bold as possible. And we never had owls across the front when I was there. It was only Rice. We had the all whites with the navy. It's something very unique with the uniform that I actually did until Nike quit allowing it, is we wore a 9-inch number on the back, which you either have an 8 or a 10. And he went to whoever was making the uniforms at the time, might have been Majestic or Nike, and they agreed to do it. But he wanted a 9-inch number on the back, 4-inch on the front, exactly what he wanted. He spent hours and hours of designing that uniform. And yeah, he brought the uniform. The other one was Mr. Reckling. I think the park opened in 2001. But Rice had already been to Omaha twice, and the old Cameron Field was bad. But Coach proved that he's going to be there, and he proved that he can win, and then he started getting great support.
That's great. All right, Patrick, two questions for you. So the first question I want to ask you, when you played for Coach in 95, was he doing the calligraphy for the batting lineups then, or he had not started doing that yet, the fancy handwriting for the lineups?
You know what, Mike, when I played for him, I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I got a feeling, though, knowing Coach, like, that's just how he wrote. You know, he was the David, he wasn't an engineer, but he did that
Jasmine.
that graphic writing in the off season
Oh,
when he
yeah.
played. So he just, I mean, if you got something written from coach, the penmanship was perfect. So I can't imagine him not doing that, and the story is, the lineup was special to him. It was special to get in the lineup. So he took the time. He would get pissed, Mike, if someone got hurt right before the game, and because he would not turn in a lineup. He would not turn in the lineup with just a cross out. If you were the trainer and you went to him 30 minutes before the game and said, Joe Savory's pulled his hamstring, he was gonna get pissed because he was gonna rewrite the whole lineup.
Oh my gosh.
It was
That
very
is so
special
great.
to him, which is pretty cool.
Yes, that is cool and classic that nobody wants to get hurt in pregame because heaven forbid we have to redo the lineup card. Hey, Patrick, so same question for you. Not your favorite Rice player, that would be an unfair question, but when I say Rice baseball to you, who's one of the first players that jumps into your mind?
For me, it's Jose Cruz Jr. because I played with him, and we were the first team that went to the postseason. Back in '95, that was the first Rice team that ever made a regional. So it's a special team to me. I was on it. That helps. I'm biased, but yeah, Cheto is just a friend of mine growing up, and he embodied. Even looking back, besides coach, he was Rice baseball before we were Rice baseball. He was kind of our first marquee player. He was the 3rd overall pick before Rice had any big first rounder. So from a player wise, he's the guy that I think of. Yeah.
And that was your junior year, your draft year was his draft year also?
Correct. We played Little League together. So Cheto and I have known each other since we were 8 years old. We played machine pitch at Westbury American Little League, machine pitch Robins on the same team, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on the Tigers. Yeah, I've known him forever. So obviously I'm biased. That's part of the reason why he's the guy I think of. But yeah, and then in high school we played against each other, and ended up at Rice together.
Patrick, was it like, I'm just trying to put myself in that era. Was it a surprise when he announced, because obviously he would have been a famous recruit. Was it a surprise when he picked Rice, or was there a story to that?
I was surprised. I thought he was going to A&M. I know A&M was recruiting him. I don't know who else. We were friends. We weren't like best friends, but I know he had plenty of places to go. But the connection, I think, he could tell the story better, but from what I remember is Coach Graham threw batting practice to the Astros in the 80s and knew Jose Sr. And I think Jose Sr. wanted Cheto to play for someone that knew the game. There's still head coaches, and they're terrific coaches. There's still a lot of head coaches who are more CEOs maybe and recruiters and not necessarily baseball men. And Coach Graham is everything there is to be in a baseball man. So I think that had something to do with it.
That's awesome. Hey, David, let me come back to you. So I want to talk about, I want to have you tell us about the 2003 team. You kind of alluded to it a little bit. I want to talk, obviously the teams become the manifestation of the leader and the coach, but tell us about the 2003 team. I mean, the pitchers are famous, Neiman's 17-0, but what was it about that team that was his team that won it all?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was at Houston and came in September of 2002. So this team had already been in Omaha, got eliminated, and they were just primed. They were mature. The pitching staff was awesome, but the players on the field were just tough-minded, kind of just dirtbag guys that just played hard. But I can recall I believe we opened up at Minute Maid that year. It was the first weekend. We won the first 2, and then Alabama, we started a freshman left-hander, and Alabama beat us on that Sunday. And then we went 30 straight games without a loss, which is incredible. When you think about that in today's college baseball, winning 30 straight in a row is really difficult. But I can remember we'd won the Sunday game, and that was the 29th win in a row. And Mike Taylor, myself, Patrick wasn't always in there, but that was before Pat anyhow. But we would always have our morning meetings with Coach, and I would sit in one spot, Mike in the other, Coach facing us, and he just lit us up. I mean, he was on us about every little detail. And of course, we walked out pissed thinking, well, we just won 29 straight games. What's the problem here? You know, and of course, he wanted us to make sure that we didn't allow the players to get complacent. And we beat the Aggies that Tuesday for the 30th straight game. And then the streak ended. It was a double midweek against Lamar on that Wednesday. But this team was just relentless. They always knew they were going to win. We fielded 980. Our pitching staff was way below a 3. We had 5 guys that were just special. And the one thing I really recall of how he used his pitching as well is that if Jeff Neiman was on Friday, Umber on Saturday, and it was usually Baker on Sunday, and then Wade Townsend was kind of a swing guy for us. But if Jeff had to come in on Tuesday to get a close, then he would just bump Phillip up to the Friday and just rotate him. It was so genius because he gave him the rest, but he put his best guys in the game. And another thing I remember, and I remember it this year, because, you know, guys go in and out of good times and bad times of, you know, success and failure. And I just remember him telling me one time, he said, you know, once a guy earns the right to become the starter, he also earns the right to fail. And so he would stick with his guys. But plus, we didn't have much depth either. But it was just a team that believed in each other, played really, really hard. And he never backed off. He always challenged them. And he knew they were good, but he knew they could be really special. And that was a great year for Coach. That was something that, you know, when we eliminated Texas and Omaha, that was real special. But for us to finish it and to win that national championship. But the one thing I remember him going into the last game against Stanford, and he told the players, he said, look, you don't have to win today. He said, just be proud of what you've done and go out there and enjoy the game. And, you know, people have a hard time doing that because everybody's got a little tightness to them. And Coach, he was in a good spot. He said, whatever happens, basically, I'm proud of you. You've done a lot. And then we went out there and played a great game and won the national championship.
Oh, that's so great. And by the way, those Stanford teams were loaded. Oh my gosh, like just unbelievable. The run Stanford was on at that time. That was their 5th straight Omaha, that team.
He wouldn't let the pitchers watch their batting practice. They were so good.
Yeah.
I mean, and they destroyed the baseball. And, you know, I remember him going to Phillip Umber at the last game and basically said, we're going to throw the split. And we're going to throw the split a lot because we have to. We got to do whatever it takes. And I remember the meeting. It was awesome.
Yeah. I heard a big league manager use the expression solve for winning. And then, you know, like that's the job, right? Like you can't just do the same thing every day. Every day you have to solve for how to win that game. And that's exactly when you describe what Coach was doing there. That's what that is. Hey, Patrick, before I'm going to do this second read, and then I'm going to come back to you for I want to talk to you about the 2006 through 8 run. You know, like the 3 straight Omahas. So this is the last of the Sunday Night Conversations for 2024. I want to say thanks again to our friends at Netting Pros. They're college baseball's top facility equipment and netting supplier. They're the official netting partner of D1 Baseball and our Sunday Night Conversations. Again, you can learn more at nettingpros.com. I've said this throughout these several years of these fall podcasts. The guys at Netting Pros, you're going to see them at the convention. Their stuff is awesome. They are experts. And they love our sport. So when they put their product in your facility, it's going to be personal to them. They're not making a sale and then they're gone. So again, I can't think of a better way to do business than with people like Netting Pros, and we're so grateful for them. So Patrick, let me come to you. You start your coaching career and you just go to Omaha 3 straight years. It's easy, right? That's just what happens. I mean, we all. Yeah, just kidding. But tell me about that run. And David, feel free to jump in here too. But that is, I like. It's very easy to say, hey, you go to Omaha 3 straight years. All of us on this call know it's so hard. Like one little thing can go sideways and you go 0 out of 3 years. But to go 3 straight years, what are your takeaways from those 3 teams?
Well, I was fortunate to get hired when I did. David had a hand in putting those teams together. But what I remember is walking that very first year in the fall, coach and David probably said it too, was, hey, we're really good. Don't talk. Just throw BP and observe and stay out of the way mostly. And Mike, that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but it's pretty true. We were number 1 team in the nation when the year started, and that was my first year of coaching. So I was happy to be there. The team was really good. We had a terrific leader. So that's what I remember the most. And then it was basically the same team the next year. So the first 2 years was a lot of the same guys. Joe Savory and Coach mentioned Eddie Degerman and Cole Sinclair and some of these guys. And the following year, 07, was a lot of the same people. And then in 08, we had some turnover. That was probably the first. I guess I took a lot of pride in that year because there was a lot of new people in 08 that we had to get them ready and get back there. So, David put those teams together and a great group of guys.
It's awesome. Joe, let me ask you. So go ahead, David. Go ahead.
In 2005, that group of freshmen, that group that made that run 6, 7, and 8, went to LSU and won the regional, went to Tulane and pushed them to game 3, extra innings, and they were number 1 in the country at the time. And so we knew we had a special group, and they stuck together. You could see their togetherness, their will to win, and then they made that run. But they were really good as freshmen in 05 as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Anthony Rendon. I recall him being struggling with injuries in college too, and I know this is crazy to say, but I felt like there was a vibe out there that if Rendon stayed healthy, he might be the best player, the Rice player of all time. And it's crazy to say that he was better than Berkman. It's crazy to say he was better than Jose Cruz Jr., et cetera, et cetera. But it does feel like he could have, if you gave him 60 starts 3 times, God knows what the numbers would have been.
Yeah, 09, his freshman year, I believe it was his freshman year, he had 26 home runs, and he was playing like a veteran as a freshman. It was impressive.
Oh, that's incredible. The names of the players. Joe, was there a team for you? Don't let me steer the jury here. What was your Rice team?
Well, it's been talked about a lot, but the 2005 team was. I think I probably either went to or listened to. They did student radio at Rice at the time. Every one of those games that season, because that group of freshmen just was a lot of fun, and I'd heard a lot of buzz about them coming into the year, and you're just always, you don't know what to expect, right? You're just like, okay, it's going to be a young team, but so who knows? But that team really grew up as the season went on, as Coach Pierce alluded to. I think during the middle of that regular season, got swept by San Jose State, and you're just like, okay, well, who knows where it's gonna go from here? But then they, got hot at the right time, and that super regional is still burned in my brain of one of the most competitive super regionals I've ever seen. That was the Tulane team, as Coach mentioned, that was number 1 in the country. It was Micah Owings, it was Brian Bogusevic. I'm sure there were other big leaguers involved there. Matt Reiser was on that team, who's in coaching now. But it was fun, as Coach Hallmark references. It was fun that you could see that coming, right? And so the 2005 team was pretty doggone good. They were just a breath away from Omaha, and so you knew, okay, this is going to be real the next few years, and they lived up to every bit of it. You don't lift the trophy in the end, but as these guys know, it hurt to get eliminated in Omaha, but any season that ends in Omaha, you have to take a lot of pride in it, and so the fact that the consistency those guys brought to the table was just incredible over that run of years.
So great. Hey, David, so let's wrap with this. So the question is kind of like, what is something that we don't know about Coach Graham but I think the better way to say it is like, what's your favorite memory of Coach Graham? And like, I heard him interviewed on Ryan Brownlee's podcast for the ABCA, and they were talking about how much Coach Graham loved like science fiction, or, like, and I like the graphic designing. Like, he just seemed like this, like he feels like he would have been the perfect person for the Dos Equis commercials. Like, just the more you know about him, the more interesting he is. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm fishing for here, David, is like, what's a favorite memory, or, maybe something that, if you only knew Coach Graham on the baseball field, you wouldn't know about him.
Coach had a great sense of humor. I mean, he was really funny. And in the off season, there was not really an off season for him other than he wasn't in competition, because he was just always involved in baseball. He's a huge reader. He read tons of books, but I mean, there's so many memories. I can remember, this is kind of a funny story though. We were at Lafayette, and as we pulled in, he said, "You think we had a shower, or you think we had to just go back?" And I go, "I think we had a shower." He goes, "Nah, I think we had to just go home after the game." I'm like, "Okay, let's just go home after the game." He goes, "No, I think we need a shower." I'm like, "Coach, whatever you want." So we go in and we win a tight game. It was great. And they fed us. So we drive over and we pull our suitcases out. And the coaches are kind of right here, and all the players are in the clubhouse. And Coach goes strip naked, except his socks, and walks to the shower. And all the players are in the shower. And they're like, "Oh, my God." And they scattered. Coach takes his socks off, takes a shower, leaves the socks there. We get on the bus. We go home. He had such a great sense of humor. We all know he was smart and how much he cared about his team, but I think his sense of humor gets overlooked.
Oh, that is great. That is so great. And again, like, that's part of him being, like, him when he got the job at Rice, it was not his first rodeo. He had already accomplished so much. That's beautiful. Patrick, same question for you, like a favorite memory or something that maybe something unique about Coach Graham that people don't talk about.
Yeah, for me, it's the commentary. It didn't happen often, and it would be, it was a lot of baseball. It was mostly baseball in those meetings that Coach referred to in the office. Every morning we'd have a coaches meeting, and but every once in a while he'd get off on a tangent on life. And he was a little bit of the philosopher. He'd come up with some good, whether they were stories or he was just commenting. I would call them commentaries on life, politics, anything. Highly intelligent. And I learned a lot in those meetings. I learned as much in those as I did in the baseball side of it. I wrote down one quote, probably one of my favorites was, and this is totally not baseball, which is to me super interesting. It's those who lack empathy and introspection are hardships on society. I don't know what made him say that, but the longer I coach for him, the more I realize, like, these things he says they're gold. And so I actually would write them down. I don't have very many. I have about 10, but I'll share them with my players, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome. Very cool. Hey, I do have one more final question for us. And Joe, you can handle that previous question, but maybe you can start us off on this question. What coach, kind of the themes for this year's Sunday Night Conversations we're in this era of uncertainty in college sports, and we're in this era where the SEC is really dominating the top of our sport, and it makes things like what Coach accomplished at Rice seem not possible, right? Like, it just feels like if you told me someone not named, a non-SEC school was winning the national title in baseball this year, I would be like, I'm having a tough time picturing that, right? Like, the league has become so dominant. But then but I take heart, not that I'm not pulling against the SEC, but I love the variety, right? I love the stories. And so if somebody had said to us in 1991 that, hey, Rice is getting ready to go, in the next 20 years, Rice is going to go to Omaha 7 times and win a national title in baseball, I would have said, we need to get you in front of a doctor immediately, right? Like, you're talking like a crazy person right now. Like, what do you mean? Like, how about they just have 7 winning seasons, right? Like, forget 7 Omahas. But Joe, that's the question. Like, can this happen again? And then David and Patrick, I want to have you guys handle this again. Can something like this happen again?
Well, yeah, I'm eager to hear their answers because they're the guys who are, building programs and trying to win ball games. So I'll be interested to hear their take on this. I want to believe it can, right? And it's been, I'm partial to Coach Graham's program build at Rice, but you think about what Gene Stevenson did at Wichita. You think about Gary Gilmore at Coastal Carolina. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. These programs that just don't have any right to be as good as they were made to be because they had these both. Coach Pierce and Coach Hallmark used the term just like willpower. Like what those three coaches had in common among many things was just that they were like, we're going to win here, and that's just all there is to it. We're just going to figure it out. The landscape is just so tough now that it's a really tough road to hoe. But gosh, Roons, I want to believe that somebody can come along and do it. I mean, it's going to take a lot of things that happen off the field, right? There's got to be the investment. There's got to be the want to from an administrative standpoint, all that stuff. But I sure hope so, because it was a fun run for Rice, for, Coastal, for whoever else. But I want to believe that we can see it again. But man, it's year by year, it seems harder and harder just with the way that the sport has gone.
Yep. Hey, and David, and as you answer, I want to say, like, I asked this question of people, but then I have to remind myself that, hey, Evansville was just in Game 3 of a Super Regional last year, and Oral Roberts was just in Omaha 2 years ago. So it's these things are being done. But I guess maybe a different way to ask this, David, is what can we learn from what Coach Graham did at Rice as people enter this era where it feels very low percentage?
Yeah, I think more than anything, you can learn how he went about the day-to-day, how he never gave in and always felt like he was going to win the game, always felt like he had the ability to coach a team and get the max out of them. And I think it's got to be a special group with a special group of coaches that, there's some alignment with some guys stick around, some guys have really plus years. But I do think it's possible for the simple fact it's the game of baseball. And I think when you look at football, basketball, especially football, top 10 teams dominate. It's just so physical. But you don't have to be 6'4" and 225. You can be a really good baseball player and be in the right spot and then build around that. So I'm like Joe. I'm going to say I hope so, because I think we need that hope and that thought of wherever you are, that you're playing for Omaha, and you take a look at what the mission is, where you're trying to get to, and you work backwards and you understand what it takes. It's difficult for anybody. I mean, we were there in 21, 22 at Texas, and 23 we had a great team, and a fly ball keeps us from going, potentially. But I mean, there's just so many variables that happen in the game that anybody can put a team together and have that commitment, like you said. So I do think it's possible.
Yep. Patrick, same question for you. What are your big takeaways from what Coach Graham built at Rice compared to what you're trying to build at UTSA?
Yeah, it's the versatility and the adaptability. That kind of encapsulates Coach. He never did anything exactly the same. The competitive will was the theme, but I think in the early years we won with hitting. If you go back and look in 1995 and those first few teams, we would just outslug people. And then the team that won it all, and some of those later teams, it was built around pitching. So at the end of the day, I do think it's possible. I mean, certainly I'm at a place that we're trying to do that. We're slowly winning more and more games here. But you got to be versatile and adaptable. The coach would talk about that so often. So I sure hope it is. I think it is. I think it's possible to get to Omaha and continue to go to regionals year in and year out at mid-majors. Fullerton did it. That's another one you mentioned a few. We actually talk about schools like that now. So you got to have that recruiting base. I think we do here in Texas. So Coach certainly did in Houston. And like David mentioned, it's still the game of baseball. So the 40th best team can go out and win a series against a top 5 team. And it doesn't totally shock people. It's not the norm, but it's not all that shocking at the end of the day. So that's what him and I are trying to do. And you got to love it. Coach loved it. That's a big part of it.
Yep.
You got to embrace being the underdog.
I love the words you guys used over and over again, like just the will, the conviction, I think about, it's funny, when you're a young coach, you do a lot of modeling. You think to yourself, like, my dream is to be a Division I head coach. Who can I be? Who's doing that reminds me of me? And Coach Graham and I had the same birthday, April 6th. And certainly that was the only similarity, right? Like, I'm not trying to compare myself to Coach Graham, but it's just, in a corny way, you see something like that and you're like, how cool is that? I have the same birthday as this guy. And I think about him and his generation of coach, the popularity of our sport right now and the growth of our sport. I really believe that we are bearing the fruits of their labor. Back 20, 30 years ago, when nobody was all that interested in college baseball exploding in popularity, but these men just put the sport on their backs and just willed it to happen, to use that word. And so again, like, it was, when we learned that Coach had passed, it was so sad, but it was, what a great run and what a great opportunity. I've had so much fun researching for this podcast, like doing all the research about 12 straight regular season championships and those 7 years at San Jack and, the 7 Omahas and what had transpired before. And what a neat person. And again, I watched the one of the games in Omaha against Stanford, and I got chills. Just, it's Rosenblatt and it's Coach Graham versus Coach Marquis. So anyway, so cool. Thank you guys for doing this. This was so fun. What a great way to cap the fall. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys joining me for this.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Joe. He was a special man, really close to Patrick and I, and we're definitely better because of him.
Yep, that's well said.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Well said. Hey, to the listeners, that is it for Sunday Night Conversations. We will, once we get through the Thanksgiving holiday, we'll get back in our rhythm with the regular D1 baseball podcast. The fall reports are on the website like crazy. Joe Healy, we like to say man or machine. I feel like he cranks out one a day. He may do 200 of the 300 Division I programs by himself. I'm more of a 1 or 2 a week guy, but that's all good. It's I'm a role player on Joe's team.
You're shooting for quality over quantity, Roons. That's what it is.
Maybe. Yeah, I appreciate that. So, hey, that is it. If we don't talk to you, everybody have a great holiday, and we will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.